Okay, so something that I've wanted to do for a little while is called Mashiach Monday and go through the Gospels and learn about Mashiach, learn from Mashiach, and start talking about things that are found here halakhically and how they apply to us if you're Jewish, if you're living a Jewish life, and how you can be more observant from learning from the Gospels of Matthew. And you can take these things from it. So, how did he follow halakha? How did his followers follow halakha? In this case, we're not even dealing really with Mashiach per se. We're dealing actually with John. And so we want to get into that just a little bit here. And so Matthew, being a halakhically observant Jew, and Luke as well, both include these in birth stories. And so I wanted to bring out this one about John, Yochanan, as you'll call him. And it happened, so we'll get right into it, okay? So I want to share some halakha from the Gospels. And it happened on the 8th day, they came to circumcise a child, and they are wanting to name him after his father Zechariah. So there's two things here that you should note as far as what's going on in the background, sort of putting the Gospels into context, if you will. And so the context here is a Jewish life where the readers who are reading the Gospel of Luke would be very familiar with what exactly is going on here, but the modern Christian reader may be completely lost. So I want to sort of enlighten some of that. So one of the things that's going on here is that they're wanting to name him on the 8th day. So he didn't have a name until the 8th day, and they were naming him on the 8th day, and they wanted to name him after his father, Zechariah. Okay, so what exactly is going on here? And so I do want to get into that, but first let's continue and read the entire passage, and then I'll get into it. But I just wanted to point out, sometimes you will skim over that and not pay attention to it, but it is in fact really important if you're an observant Orthodox Jew. Okay, they were wanting to name him after his father Zechariah, and his mother answered and said, "No, but he will be named Yochanan." And they said to her, "There is no one of your relatives who is called by this name." This is also very important as well. So I will get into this shortly. But I wanted to really just point this out as I was going through it. They are saying to him, "You're not naming him after one of your relatives." Is this something that was important in time of the name of Yochanan? Is this something that Luke was familiar with, that the readers of Luke would be familiar with? What about naming him Yochanan is so unusual? His father, is that they wanted to name him after his father, Zechariah. Is there a custom to do that? Is that normal? Where does that custom come from? Why were they wanting to name him after Zechariah? Why were they not giving him a name before the 8th day? Now, these are all very important questions if you are a Christian reading the gospel that you may not understand at all. So they made signs to his father, asking what he wanted him to be named. And he asked for a writing tablet and wrote, saying, John is his name, or Yochanan is his name. And they were all astonished. And his mouth and his tongue were opened immediately, and he began to speak, praising God. And fear came on all those who lived near them, and in the hill country of Judea. All these events were discussed, and those who heard kept these things in their heart, saying, "What then will this child be? For indeed the hand of the Lord was with him." So I want to bring you to a few outside sources that sort of go through exactly what exactly is going on here, and understand that it was written in a Jewish context. So this is something that happens in every Jewish household. It's happened in our household. We had a son, Baruch Hashem. We were able to name him on the 8th day with his circumcision. And so my parents and my in-laws were quite confused about what was going on, but this is something for people to answer. Okay, so going in here, this is from Chabad.org, and it says, "A baby boy is given his Jewish name at the Brit, the ritual circumcision. The name chosen by the parents is considered prophetic. For this reason, it is customary for the couple not to discuss the name of their child with others prior to the naming. The parents should also not call the child by the decided name, even between themselves, until it is bestowed at the circumcision. So this is why they do not know what the name is. Right? So this obviously it comes from the angel, we know, of course. And this is prophetic about what his name means. Yochanan means there will be grace. And so that is what he is being called. Okay, so there's typically one who holds Sandak that's not mentioned here in Luke. Okay, there are a few other things that I want to get about naming children. This is Halakhapedia, and this is a great resource if you're having questions about these things that you may find in the Gospels. Okay. So, generally speaking, Ashkenazim do not name after living people for fear of shortening the other person's life or to avoid violating a living parent's honor by calling the child the same name as the parent in his presence, right? So, this is an Ashkenazic practice. The Sephardic practice is actually different, right? So, the Sephardic practice is actually to name after a living relative, right? Some say that there is no reason to pick a particular name. Even Ashkenazim are advised to choose the name of one in Nevi'im or recognize Zadok as a genius of our times, even if he's still alive. Others allow naming after a living person if it will give the namesake tremendous satisfaction and raise his low spirits. Okay, so this is a joke that I always have with my wife. We know that the writers of the gospel were Ashkenaz, but she prefers Sephardic custom. But we obviously know that Yochanan was not named after the parents, and that in fact it was named after a Zadok living at that time, Yochanan ben Zakkai. He is very, very famous as well, and so I would say that might be where they were getting his name, and also obviously it comes from the angel as well. So Sephardim in general have the custom to name children after living relatives, starting with the father's parents and then the mother's, unless there are additional factors such as loss of the mother's parent, in which case the paternal grandfather's mechila would be needed. Okay, if one is naming after both parents, such as everybody, the name of the paternal father should come first. Even by Sephardim, this minhag is not ubiquitous. In Morocco and Iraq specifically, they would not name after living, while in Nigeria and Tunis they would. Some say that if living relative gives permission, it's nevertheless okay in any location. In the case of a mixed marriage, her mother of the baby's family does allow it, but the father does not, the baby may be named for its mother's living family members. If the child is a product of a broken marriage, some recommend not naming a baby for members of either family to avoid aggravation from the opposite side. Ultimately, every family should follow its custom, okay? Naming after Zadikim. If parents want to name their child of a certain Zadok and later find out that Zadok had a middle name, they can add it to the name of their child. Okay, these are the places where you will find some of these customs. I have the Sefer Hasidim right here, so this book costs quite a bit of money, but you can get it in English if you so desire. And here in Sefer Hasidim, which is written by Yehuda Chassid, and he gives this. If Gentiles name a child after his father who is still living, it does not matter. However, Jews are opposed to that. In some communities, children are named only after persons who have passed away. Rabbi Yehuda Chassid disapproves of the practice of naming a child after a living father or relative. Okay, so he is against the idea of naming after a living relative. And so therefore, Yochanan would be okay by Yehuda Chassid, but not okay per se by the Sephardic way of naming babies. Okay, so I wanted to get into some things that I have as far as the halakha of naming babies and where some of these things come from. And I've given myself a few little notes, as you can probably see, so that I know where to go. Okay, so a name defines a man. In Judaism, a name is not merely a conglomeration of letters put together, but as a convenient way to refer to someone. Ideally, it is a definition of the individual, a description of his personality, an interpretation of his traits. It may even be a portent of the person's future, or perhaps a prayer that the persons bearing this particular name shall live up to the potential expressed in the name. The Torah, Genesis 5:29, relates that Noah was given his name with prayer. This will bring rest from our work and a toil of our hands. Noach from the word Yenachmenu. The intent was that Noach would lighten the burden of his family's toil by introducing agricultural tools. This is according to Rabbi David Kimchi, or also known as the Radak. The Arizal writes that the nature and behavior of a person, whether good or bad, can be found by analyzing his name. Even the numerical value of the name's letters is an indication of the individual's character and personality. So we actually find this not here, but in Matthew 1:21. Okay. So where is it? Where is the Yeshua one? And she will give birth to a son, and we will call his name Yeshua, because he will save his people from their sins. Yeshua means Hashem will save. And so obviously Hashem is the one who does all the saving. And so Hashem saves the people through their from their sins through Yeshua the Messiah. Okay. Now all this happened that was spoken by the Lord through the prophet will be fulfilled, saying, "Behold, the virgin." That doesn't actually say virgin in Isaiah 7:14. It actually says young maiden. It does not say virgin, but I'll get into that in another video. Will become pregnant, will give birth to a son, and it will call his name Emmanuel. Okay, so God is with us. So wanted to speak about just get to that idea that the name is prophetic and that there's a spirit of prophecy when you define a name. So again, I'm going to get into the Sephardic custom and the Ashkenazi custom. So in certain communities, it is considered auspicious as a segula for long life for a father to name a child after himself. So going back to Luke 159, that is what they're doing. They're trying to name him after the father in the Sephardic custom. Some of those communities extend the customs to name their newborn sons and daughters after a living grandfather or grandmother, so that the older people too have the good fortune of blessing continued long life. The Talmud of Chulin 47b tells a distraught mother who is concerned about having her son circumcised because there had been a history of illness in the family. The bris was delayed until Rabbi Nassan Habavli said it was safe to circumcise the child. In gratitude, the child was named after him. Going into the Ashkenazi custom, it is generally the accepted Ashkenazi custom, however, not to name the children after living people. This is based on Sefer Hasidim, which I just read to you, which states, although Gentile parent, I said that already, it is hard to ascertain the exact reason for Ashkenazi custom of naming only after deceased. The following reasons have been suggested. If a father were to name his son after himself, his other children would no doubt at times address their brother by the name in the presence of their father, so they're not allowed to say it from that, okay? In page 83, we have some of the halachot of naming a baby, and I wanted to go over that really quick. The custom of naming a boy at his bris is based on the fact that it was in conjunction with the commandment of Milah. God changed Abram's name to Abraham. The name Avraham was much more than an old name with a new letter. It symbolized a total new identity. Additional source for this custom is Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, chapter 48, which states that Moses was named at his bris. There's some who say that Moses was already circumcised when he was born, and so they say he was named at the Haftamas Dam Bris. Haftamas Dam Bris is a second circumcision for one which was not complete or full at the time of circumcision. I got one of those when I began my conversion process. Okay. Then you have one from Messiah to Abraham that talks about the different names that Messiah will have, one of them being Shiloh, and we actually find in the Hebrew in Genesis 49:10 or Bereshit 49:10, we find when it says when it mentions the name Shiloh, and this is the source for all the commentaries, the name of Mashiach will be Shiloh. You actually find Ki Yeshua, that is Yeshua. If you actually arrange the name Shiloh, it spells Le-Yeshu, which would probably actually be Yeshua's name. Yeshu would probably actually be a more accurate name than even Yeshua, but Yeshu being his name, and that's really interesting as well. That all being said, circumcise your children on the 8th day. It is proper to have a sandak, or somebody who holds a baby during the circumcision. It is also proper to have a minyan, if you can, to do it as early in the morning as you possibly can. It is proper to have a moil who has been trained to do the circumcision, which is both a cutting and the pulling away. It is also important to do a metzisis be'pe, which is drawing of the blood with the mouth, which is done through a tube nowadays, typically, and a lot of moil will use a small little tool to draw the blood. This is also for if you are Jewish. A few other very interesting things is that if you have a Jewish mother, it should be done. If you have a Jewish father, it is not necessary. We find this not only in Jewish tradition, but also we see that Paul upholds it as well with the naming of Timothy in Acts chapter 16, verses 1 through 3. I'm actually going to put that in my notes. And see if we can get that to pull up. Okay, and he came also to Derbe and Lystra, behold, a certain disciple there is named Timothy, the son of a believing Jewish woman, but of a Greek father, who was well spoken of by the brothers in Lystra and Iconium. Paul wanted this one to go with him, and that he took them and circumcised him, because the Jews who were in those places, for they all knew that his father was Greek. And as they went through the towns, they passed on to observe the rules that had been decided by the apostles and elders who were in Jerusalem, so that churches were being strengthened in the faith and were growing in number every day. So we see here that the Jerusalem Council does not stop circumcision of Jewish men who have a Jewish woman, but a Greek father, right? So obviously, Paul is very against circumcising. We see this in Galatians all the time of Gentiles, but he is not against circumcising when it comes to the halakha, which is of a Jewish mother. Paul himself takes the idea of a Jewish mother to circumcise as well, and so that is important too. Okay, hopefully this was enlightening and useful. Hopefully they'll get better as I continue on. But this is my first Mashiach Monday video. Thank you.